In canon, after losing his father's lightsaber on Cloud City, Luke Skywalker briefly took up a yellow lightsaber as he continued to operate as a Jedi Knight. He had found the saber in an abandoned Jedi temple from the High Republic era, and continued to wield it until it was destroyed while Luke and his friends were trapped in a realm called No Space. In a battle with ancient droids that once belonged to the Nile, Luke suffered through both his mechanical hand and his lightsaber being crushed. After his confrontation with his father on Cloud City, Luke's ability to use the Force became strained, and he described it as sometimes feeling like a whisper, and other times feeling stronger than ever before. After the destruction of his yellow saber, Luke was immediately aware that he needed a new weapon, but also that he needed to understand his connection with the Force through training. After he and his friends had escaped from No Space, Luke examined the yellow Kyber crystal of the saber, admitting to R2 that he didn't know much about them at all. At this point, Luke had recovered one of the sacred Jedi texts, but he was disappointed to see that the information it held about Kyber crystals was all philosophy, describing how Jedi would go to Ilum to find crystals. Luke and R2 had traveled to Ilum once, shortly after his duel with Vader, only to find the planet completely under Imperial control. Luke realized that choosing a crystal and building a saber had been a rite of passage for the Jedi of the past. He thought that perhaps Yoda and Obi-Wan had never taught him any of this because he already had his father's lightsaber, but he realized that both that saber and his yellow one weren't really his, since he did not bond with the crystal or build the sabers himself. Igniting the yellow saber, he told R2 that he never felt a connection with the yellow crystal, and that the saber itself had been merely a good tool until now, nothing more. Now that the crystal was cracked, the saber barely worked and was highly unstable. Studying the Jedi text, Luke was frustrated to see that it had no instructions on how to actually build a saber. He realized that the first step was obtaining a new crystal before he could even consider building a new hilt, and the text mentioned other worlds where Kyber could be found. Aside from needing a new saber, Luke also felt like he needed to take control of his own destiny, since his connection to the Force was disrupted and he found it difficult to continue his training. Setting out to find a new crystal, Luke and R2 traveled to Christophsis, which was under Imperial rule but without much of a physical presence. Landing outside a small mining town, Luke hoped to find crystal prospectors eager to sell their inventory. According to the Book of Jedi texts, Christophsis was one of the few places that Kyber crystals could be found. However, they were still incredibly rare and the planet didn't have as much as Ilum. Luke told R2 that trading Kyber was illegal in the Empire, but Lando had told him that there was still an active black market operating on Christophsis. Since the Empire didn't bother mining the Kyber themselves on Christophsis, the local prospectors would sell whatever they found, and Luke hoped to obtain one by posing as a buyer. Handing his broken lightsaber to R2, Luke admitted that his plan wasn't very good, which is why R2 would be his backup if things went south. Entering a cantina, Luke ordered a drink and casually mentioned to the bartender that he was hoping to conduct business. He said that since Christophsis had a reputation for having some of the best gems available, he was hoping to source some rare pieces from the local prospectors. The bartender, very interested, leaned in and asked Luke what he was specifically looking for, and that he could point him in the right direction for a small fee. Luke repeated that he was looking for the rarest crystals, and the bartender quietly confirmed that he must want Kyber. Suddenly, a blaster bolt flew through the bartender's chest as Luke looked around in shock. He watched as every patron in the bar was gunned down by a woman holding two blasters. She quickly dropped them, putting her hands up and asking him what he was going to do about it, and she knew his name. R2 rolled in behind her, and Luke quickly summoned his broken saber, ordering the woman to explain herself. She said that she had just saved his life and introduced herself as Gretta. Luke noticed a blaster behind the bar, but was not yet convinced. Gretta explained that the rumor that one could simply buy Kyber on Christophsis was a lie. The town really survived because the locals would simply capture anyone who came looking for Kyber and sell them to the Empire. When Luke asked why she saved him, she said that he was a Jedi, maybe the only Jedi. She explained that her and a few others still believed in the Jedi, and she suspected that Luke or another Jedi might come searching for crystals since Ilum was completely occupied. Luke was disappointed with her for killing the people in the bar, even if it was to save him, and he left to go find Kyber on his own. Gretta quickly yelled that he was going the wrong way, and insisted that he let her help him. Luke replied that he didn't want her help, since the only thing he knew about her was that she was a killer. Gretta explained that she was born on Jedha, and her family were all Falanasi, an order of Force users. When the Empire destroyed Jedha City 4 years earlier, they killed her entire family. She told Luke that when he destroyed the Death Star, he avenged her family's deaths and closed a hole in her heart. She asked him to let her repay the favor. Luke told R2 to go back to the ship and wait for him, and to tell the others where he was if he didn't return. As they sped away, Luke asked Gretta about the Falanasi and if they used Kyber crystals themselves. She replied that they didn't, and the Falanasi hadn't been Force-sensitive for many generations, but they considered the Force to be a great mystery and wanted to understand it. She told Luke that they were looking for a man named Cuata. She explained that when the Empire built the Death Star, they brought together the best minds who knew about Kyber to design it, and Cuata was an academic researcher that specialized in Kyber. Cuata had fled the Empire when his colleagues began disappearing, and came to Christophsis to hide and study Kyber. They soon found Cuata, who politely asked Luke for his broken saber. When Luke asked why, Cuata began speaking to the numerous Kyber crystals that hung around his neck, explaining that the crystals thought that Luke needed his help. Luke admitted that he did need help, and handed over the saber, which Cuata quickly proceeded to dismantle so he could inspect the yellow crystal. He noted that the crystal was almost broken in half, and he assured Luke that he could somewhat repair it, but he would want something in return. Inside Cuata's laboratory, he noted that Luke's saber seemed to be weirdly built, and Luke explained that both he and R2 had tinkered with it. Cuata chastised him, explaining that fiddling with a lightsaber could cause it to explode. Luke explained that lightsaber maintenance wasn't part of his training, since he had to learn a lot in a little amount of time. Cuata showed him the 5 main parts of the lightsaber: the power cell, the casing, the focusing lens, the emitter, and the crystal itself. He explained that the crystal was the key, and it focused not only the energy from the power cell but from the Force, and that a good connection to the user could allow the saber to feel like it was moving by itself. Gretta asked Luke if he had ever felt anything like that, and he replied that he hadn't, with both of the sabers he had owned. Cuata said that was because Luke had found the sabers, he had not chosen the crystals, and they had not chosen him. Luke explained that his first saber had belonged to his father, a great Jedi, which Cuata admitted was better, but still not the same. Examining the cracked yellow crystal, he told Luke that he could somewhat fix it by diverting energy around the cracked part to make it more stable. He then pulled out a red crystal, which was what he wanted Luke for. Cuata said that he had heard there was a way to pull the dark side out of red crystals through the Force, and he wanted Luke to do it for observation purposes. Luke was quick to point out that he had never even heard of anything like that, but Gretta interjected that she had. She explained that the Falanasi had their own ritual for cleansing Kyber, which they had offered as a service after the fall of the Sith, and the Jedi Order had asked them to heal as many red crystals as possible. She told Luke that in order for a crystal to be made red, it had to be bled by a dark side user, who would pour their rage, pain, and fear into the crystal, leaving it in scarlet agony. To heal it, Luke would have to do the opposite, by using the light side and his own joy and hope to offset the pain that the bleeding caused. She warned that the process would be difficult, but Luke said that he would give it a try. Sitting down, he began to meditate on the red crystal. he suddenly found himself transported into some terrifying dimension, seemingly a world within the dark side itself. In the distance, he saw his father, Darth Vader, and then the vision flashed out and sent him back into the real world. Cuata eagerly asked Luke what he had seen with a clipboard in hand. Luke shakily replied that he had seen his father, which caused Cuata to wonder why a great Jedi would be inside a red crystal. Gretta insisted that he leave Luke alone, and that he needed to fulfill his end of the bargain. Cuata agreed, but he gave Luke another crystal, one that was clear and raw, and asked Luke to try to connect with it. He assured Luke that the process should be much easier than with the red crystal, and Luke reluctantly sat down again, focusing on the clear crystal. He found himself face to face with Master Yoda. Luke said that he knew this vision wasn't real, but he asked Yoda why he had never answered when he would call out to him through the Force. He said that he had been trying to learn everything on his own and had been hurt, and asked why Yoda didn't help him. Yoda replied that all Jedi must walk their own path, and that Luke must know this or else he would have returned to Dagobah already for more training. He said that Luke must not have truly wanted to speak with him, or he would have. He told Luke that a great decision lay before him that had nothing to do with the Force or the Jedi. It was a decision that Luke needed to make about himself, and until he did, he could not be a Jedi. Luke grew agitated, telling Yoda that he always said so much without actually saying anything. Luke said that he would be fine without Yoda's help, and he said goodbye to his master. After Luke vanished, Obi-Wan's Force Spirit appeared, and Yoda asked for his thoughts. Obi-Wan said that after all Luke had learned, he was still not ready. Yoda replied that he was right, yet Luke had learned much and had still appeared to them, even if he didn't understand what he was doing. He said that when the time came, Luke would be ready. Emerging from the vision, Luke found the crystal in his palm, only now it was green. Cuata handed him the broken saber, saying that while it wasn't perfect, it should work until Luke decided to replace the crystal. Luke thanked him for fixing it, but said that he was leaving and taking the green crystal with him, since he would need to build his own lightsaber one day. Luke also took the red crystal, hopeful that he could learn more and one day heal it. Back at his X-Wing, Luke thanked Gretta for her help, saying that he had learned things he never dreamed of. Gretta told him that since she had helped him, she felt as though she had fulfilled the debt she owed her family, and would be leaving Christophsis. She asked Luke if he would be returning to the Alliance, and he replied that he would eventually, but holding the green crystal in one hand and the red in the other, he told her that he had some thinking to do.